You gotta be kidding me. Alright, so Halo Wars. One thing, it wasn't produced by 343 or Bungie, and that's one thing that I actually feel comfortable to know, because I know they would put out something like this. Because, well, let me start off with the campaign first. Now, it had okay acting. The storyline wasn't really that compelling, like the weight of an entire Forerunner fleet. It didn't really come on to me that much. And the campaign it wasn't too memorable. And it was fairly challenging, yes. I don't know, it felt a little bit unfair at times. But it was all around okay. It did take a while to beat. And I felt kind of nice trying to get a very lengthy timed experience of something over, like, lengthy timed experience of a campaign. I like long campaigns. I like campaigns that do take a while, because it feels like a campaign, something that's your mission, a goal. Now, I don't like those really short ones. 3-4 hours? Come on. But still, it had really nice graphics, I'll say that. Well, the CGI cutscenes, through the RTS itself, it was okay. I've seen some ones with better ones, I've seen some ones with worse. But the RTS itself, in-game cutscenes, they looked okay. Scaling was a little bit funny, but yet again, I haven't seen an RTS where the scaling wasn't funny. And beyond that, that's nice, it was fine and dandy. Now, my one real problem with the game was after I did beat the campaign, and the ending was just, it was okay. And there wasn't really too much closure to it, but I didn't really care off in the first place, so who cares? You had just the other feature on Halo Wars, and that was multiplayer. Multiplayer, well, let's just say this. There's two types of people. The rushers and the non-rushers. Now, if you play skirmish a lot, which is still technically the multiplayer, it's just basically a forum where you play against the AIs. And the AIs try to literally build really, really, really unnecessarily and unfairly fast. Like, they will, on the hardest difficulty, they'll almost always engage you as early as possible, which that is fairly annoying. They give you no breathing room or no time to try and do anything. And then on multiplayer, this does happen much more often than it should, especially whenever you're playing with more than just one person. Whenever you're by yourself, people kind of are uncomfortable and they just turtle because they're 1v1, but whenever it's two people, they feel confident and want to challenge the other person. Like, they go like, oh, if one person's weaker, then that's the end of them. Oh, let me talk about game mechanics first before I go on to the actual multiplayer, which was my real problem. It's slow. Halo Wars is a really slow game. I'm talking, you make resources at 10 a time. Not 10 per second, just at 10 a time. So it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. It's not like it increases a little bit more, like it'll go 10 faster, but it's still 10. So that renders it to be really slow. It doesn't feel like whenever you build a building, the payoff isn't that good until after a while, until you've noticed the payoff. But initially, whenever you build a new building, or build more units, or build more of stuff, it doesn't feel like you're getting too much of a good payoff, because the game is slow. Really slow-paced. Building units, slow. If you ever need a unit in an emergency situation, don't ever count on it until it's almost done. Even if that, all units in the game build slow. Which that allowed them to do their nice little population cap of 40, sometimes 50 if you're Covenant. And that's not really a lot of units to play around with, so even armies out the window because you don't have enough space for an even army. Ignore trying to build an even army, it's pointless. I'll get to that later. And then you get down to the general problem of this last one, from small populations and slow resources to, well, landlocked bases. Gosh, do I hate them so much. Where I have to be just kind of, like, stuck in one spot. Like, I can only build so many of this. And then, even if then you're in a situation where you're trying to hide, you can't move. You can't move somewhere where somebody can't find you. Somebody's going to find you at the very end of the game because it's either here, here, or here. They can't be over here because, well, their base has to be right here. And if it's not there, then they're cheating. I don't know any situations like that. And this is really annoying. After, like, you'll begin to notice small things like this. Or the times whenever you're able to lock your base, I really wish it would just do something simple, like maybe boost the hit points of your base, which that would have been nice. I mean, by it's not as open before, so it can probably take more damage. It makes sense. But it can't. It just dies the same. And then, finally, down to the multiplayer. That was just the whole game mechanic itself and how it worked, and it's still really annoying. Now, the maps are also small. They're really small. Yeah, they're really small. Now, here's multiplayer. Now, you do have your two types of people, your rushers and your campers. Your rushers just, well, do the same thing that the AI did in Skirmish, and then they try to attack you as quickly as possible, unnecessarily as quickly as possible. And the campers, they just sit there and then pop out with the most biggest, best force ever of all time. And these are really, really, really annoying playstyles to run into very often. And the game kind of trained people to rush, but yet again, the game also kind of trained people to camp as well. So I wouldn't blame the players, because they're just taking advantage of what the game failed to do properly, and that was balance. And this is the one thing that may take up the entire length of the video, is balance. Balancing issues are really prevalent in this game. You will notice them almost immediately when you get on multiplayer. Campaign is not as noticeable because the AIs are toned down to not be as destructive, and use these balancing things, balancing pros and cons at their hands. Now, you have two races in the game. Would have been nice to have a third race. Human and Covenant. Covenant guys, they are the early birds. They are meant to strike early. You have an initial Covenant leader when you start. It's meant to be used as early as possible so you can rank them up so they can be the toughest thing to kill in the world. Even Scarabs look pretty weak sometimes compared to them, whenever they just suck up as much damage as possible, and they're very highly over-destructive. And they're also very easy to build, too. They're probably about as fast as a tank. I haven't played Covenant in a while. But their Covenant it's much more easier to use at the beginning of the game. Now, humans, on the other hand, they are slower than the Covenant. They make resources just a little bit slower. Covenant make resources faster, but their items more expensive. Humans makes resources slower, but their items are cheaper. Humans are more useful towards the end of the game, where, like tanks and vultures and other things of that sort become much more powerful over time. And it's just that simple thing right there. Right there. You can already see the issues. If I get into a multiplayer match, and I face off with a guy who's Covenant, and I'm human, he will kill me instantly. Almost always. I've barely seen a time where somebody who is in Covenant will not rush you immediately. Those don't happen way too often, and if that doesn't happen, then you're playing against somebody who doesn't know how to use the race correctly. Or as the game really dictates you to do so. And then human people, of course, I'm not sure why this always happens, but their anti-builds are much better than their meta builds at times. Like, their anti-air is really powerful, and then you just go anti-air tanks and then you're set for life. Almost always. That's what you do for humans. They're Spartan guys, they could have been Spartans for humans, like you get Spartan units, could have been much more useful, because they could have been more powerful. Like, compared, you need 3 Spartans to really... 3 Spartans could get murdered by Covenant leaders so fast. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so, the Covenant, as they do, and this is really why you have the Rushers, because they're always using Covenant guys. And because they can attack so fast, it's unbelievable sometimes how I barely even started the game, and less than 2 minutes later I'm looking at my death screen already. And this is common, repeatedly. And the game taught you how to do this because it trained you against an AI that forced you to build really fast. And you go on multiplayer and use the same skills you played against the AI, and then you play against other players just so you can move as fast as possible. With a really slow game, I really hate the way how that clicks together. Fast Covenant, slow game. That doesn't mix. And then so whenever you're human, half the time you're in a really bad situation for a very long time until you get towards late game, where it's either, if you have fewer bases, because humans make less money, because humans need a lot of money bases, Covenant needs only a few bases to be up and running, like 2, maybe 3. And then humans, they need a lot of bases to really get up and running. 2, sometimes 4, depends on who you are. Anders needs about 2. Forge needs 3. Forge needs 4 because he's using tanks. Tanks are most expensive compared to, unless you're using vultures. And then Car needs about 3. It's not really the same for the Covenant because most of the units are generally cost the same, and they are expensive, yes, but yet again, Covenant makes money better than humans. So that makes up for that negative. And I'm not sure how somebody on the design board didn't really see a lot of these balancing issues, because Covenant, with their more... even though their units were less powerful, except for their leaders, which they were still really hard to kill a lot of the time, were genuinely annoying. They immediately bulldozed you half the time. They immediately got to you half the time, because they were so fast you couldn't keep up with them at the beginning of the game. Until eventually, if they let you live, then you can beat them, because then in midpoint of the game it's a fair fight. But then later on, humans finally get the advantage. If you're a Covenant guy, your stuff's just not strong enough. That's just the end of story. It was good at the beginning of the game, and that's when you should have used it. And if you didn't use it, or you had a bad situation, well, then that's just too bad. And if you're a human guy, you now have all these really freaking powerful stuff, like 4 Mac rounds, which can kill a Scarab and all of its engineers, or Cryo, which Kabide could easily kill Scarab and all of its engineers, and a Covenant leader. And I'm mentioning Covenant leader a lot because they're so powerful. They take too long to kill. They are unimaginably too powerful. I really hated them just making the Covenant leaders this powerful, and the Spartans so much more weaker. It just didn't make too much sense to me. And then the way how you're getting supplies, I'll get to that later. It's not a really big topic, but back to balancing. Even the maps were unbalanced. It showed that they didn't really take too much time to really try and balance out their games. Somebody would get 3 extra bases and another person would get 2. Or this one 3v3 map where you have this whole map, probably about like this long, and then they decide to pit people this close together because they can. I'm not sure why. And then and if you're in that middle of that little pit, and your friends are a little bit far away to kind of help you immediately, and you happen to be human, and the guy just right across from you happens to be Covenant, well, you're going to be looking at a bad day because you can't do anything because they're too fast, you're too close, and the map is already really unbalanced on the amount of free bases that you have. People will build an entire base directly next to you just so they can put turrets on it just so it can destroy your base. Well, that's lovely. Right at the beginning of the game, too. And these douchebag moves are just kind of taught to the player in Halo Wars because that's how the game runs. That's how the game works. That's why I presume it's really supposed to be played, because that's how it is. They haven't tried to update these damage tables, which they could have easily fixed it, but they chose not to. And that's highly annoying to me. And so it's so annoying to kind of see all this stuff not really play together all in all too well. It's every time I go on multiplayer, it's rare chances whenever I win, where it's either human guys were just sitting there with an anti-build the entire time, and I just barely managed to get over it because I needed an anti to their anti, but yet again, there's not very many options. Yeah, unit options are really low in this game. They're really low. Like, there's only one type of anti-air for the humans, and then there's one type for the Covenant. That's nice. And so, it's really... The low, even with the lack of units, you can obviously see the lack of armies, the lack of power that armies have. Like, it's only one of two ways. You don't have too much variation to it, which really punishes you for having an even build. So it's so annoying to see something like that really often. Really often, almost every multiplayer match. And I've lost so many matches just to douchebaggy moves like that so often. I played StarCraft for so long too as well, not even for that long. And I see all this like people just being just they're sometimes they'll attack, sometimes they won't. They'll keep you on your toes, but the game is really balanced. People can build units generally at the same rate. Some a little slower, but not drastically slower, to where you won't have too much of a problem. Or in Supreme Commander 2, the PC version, not the 360 version, they really stopped updating that. They stopped trying to update that. And so the game is so unbalanced in so many areas, it's hard to deal with a lot of the time, and it gets so annoying to play on the multiplayer. And I know there's not a lot of console RTSs, so it doesn't really have a leader to follow off of. But still, at least try and set the bar. I mean, it's a Halo title. I'm not sure if these guys had a large budget or not. They obviously seem to spend it in CGI instead of gameplay. And it's those really little things like that just happen to bother me so much after a while. If I can't enjoy just a simple 1 or 2 matches without having to worry about somebody murdering the life out of me so fast, then that's not a match to me. That's just losing. That's not enjoyable. Ultimately, I'd have to give this game a nice reserve tile of 6 out of 10. It's so unbalanced. You can't do much about it either. They can update it to change the damage tables. That'd be really nice. Then just if they change the damage tables so it can be balanced, but they'd have to change a lot of the game core mechanics too, because things work the way how they work in this kind of very symbiosis form, but they don't really work together too well as well. That was a lot of time of my life wasted. Not the review. The review, that needed to be said, because nobody talks about the multiplayer. You go into a review, you'll just see like, oh, it does have a very nice UI. I did want to mention about the logic of the supply pads where they're dropping down ships from a bigger ship. Why not just give me units from that bigger ship so I can, make stuff? Also, even if that, another thing about leaders, I know you're probably tired about hearing about leaders. You're able to teleport them or they're almost dead. So you have to go back to their base where their units are at, or their turrets are at, and try and go and kill their leader if you really wanted to. If they're like 3 stars, then I have no real option if it's already at low health to go try kill the leader. Or they have just like a bunch of engineers following behind the leader just so they can automatically heal it whenever he gets damaged or whatever. But, that's just balancing. A lot of balancing issues. And most armies just consist of one type of unit half the time, 1 or 2 types of units. 3 wouldn't really work too well, and 4 is just unnecessary, because that wouldn't work as well either. 4 would never work. 4 types of units would never really work. And I'm not counting leaders or Spartans. It's 6 out of 10 for this game. I can't see it going any higher than that. If they want to try and go for a professional league RTS, that'd be hilarious because it is so unbalanced. And I know it's hard to make console RTSs good, but they could have fixed this. They easily could have fixed this. Alright, this is MrMacGun.